Hi everyone, welcome to our first reading lesson. As you already know, you should have chosen one of these three read aloud books that you see on the screen. On your slide deck, on the previous slide, it should have the video for all three of these. Remember that you only need to listen to the one that you've chosen, and then that's what you're going to stick with for this entire unit. So our next unit of study in reading is a focus on fantasy books. So that's why all three of the read alouds were fantasy. And then the title of this unit is The Magic of Themes and Symbols. To get started with this unit, we're going to be talking about a lot about the characters, the setting, and how an author might set up a fantasy story. But at the end, really, we're going to be talking about the themes, symbols, and kind of the deeper message that we can get out of a fantasy book. So session one that we're going to do today is called Researching the Setting. Before we do that though, I'm sure a lot of you are asking, why do we have to read fantasy? It's not something that a lot of you automatically go to. I know I'm not a huge fantasy reader either, but there are some really good reasons why reading fantasy is going to help you become a better reader. So our first one up here on the slide you'll see is that the stories are incredible. So they're wild, dangerous, they're tales where the fate of mankind might rest in one person's choices. So that's kind of incredible. It's fun to read along with things like that. Reason two here in the middle, you're studying the human condition. So the stories aren't really about elves and hobbits, those might be in there, but the story's really about good versus evil, or how power can be corrupt, and some type of quest that we might be following along with. Another reason why reading fantasy is good for you is because you're more likely to become a more powerful reader of all texts, not just fantasy. Fantasy is really deep. There's a lot of things that you need to understand when you read a fantasy book. It's very complicated. So just by getting yourself dove into something like that and having to think through it is going to make you a better reader overall. So that's our goal for you guys as a reader of fantasy during this unit. Today's teaching point is that your first task is to figure out not just where your story happens, but what kind of place it is. So good readers of fantasy always research the setting. You got to figure out where you're at in order to understand what's going on around the characters. So here are some common settings that you'll notice. Some fantasy books are set in a medieval world. So that's something like right here, swords, castles, dragons, things like that. So if you've ever read or seen the Narnia movies, that's a medieval type of setting in a fantasy book. A second very common setting is some type of futuristic world. It has some reminders of our world today, but a lot of like futuristic things happening, and that's like the Hunger Games. So if you've ever read or seen those movies, that's the type of setting we're talking about here. A third very common setting that you'll see in fantasy books is where everything seems normal, but there is some type of infiltration of magic going on. So that's like our Harry Potter settings there. So your job as a reader is to read all of these clues and things that your author is giving you, because you need to figure out where your characters are and what are the implications of the setting from around them. So I'm going to model this for you today using the book, The Paper Bag Princess. It's a short picture book, so I'm just going to get started with it for you guys, and we'll be using this throughout this unit. Let me make myself a little bigger right now so you guys can see me. There we go. Okay, so this is The Paper Bag Princess. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the front, see if there's a blurb, see if I can get any ideas of what the setting is. So I'm looking at the front here, and we see a dragon. So right there, that tells me some type of fantasy. I'm seeing a big like castle door. Normal homes don't have doors like that. And then also, I mean, the title, it says it's a princess. So right here, I'm seeing a princess. She's got some type of crown on. And then on the back, I see a dragon shooting fire. So that tells me right there a little bit of fantasy. So let's get started reading the book. So the first page says, Elizabeth was a beautiful princess. She lived in a castle and had expensive princess clothes. She was going to marry a prince named Roland. Here's our picture here. So we can see here's our prince. Here's our princess. She's got hearts all around her head. Just by looking at this page, I see this old-fashioned chair. I see some swords on the wall, stone, these arched windows. It looks like she's wearing some type of medieval dress. So I can tell right now our time period is going to be in our medieval times, kind of like the previous slide where I showed you guys the Narnia picture. So that was kind of a medieval times. If you've ever read like The Lord of the Rings, I can assume that this is going to be the same type of setting. So let's keep reading. Unfortunately, a dragon smashed her castle, burned all her clothes with his fiery breath, and carried off Prince Roland. Uh-oh, so it turned very quickly, didn't it, on the very second page. So here we've got our dragon carrying Prince Roland off, and all of her clothes have been burned by the dragon. Oh my goodness. So at first, on the very first page, it looked like it was maybe just like set in medieval times. And so you might think as a reader, oh, this could be historical fiction because I'm reading a book about historical times. But as I flip the page, we see we've got dragons here. That tells me right away, this is fantasy. So today for work time, you have two things you need to complete. When you go back to your original slide deck for the day, on your next slide after you watch this video, you'll see a spot for you to jot down your notes. Rather than writing in a notebook, I'd rather you write on here just so I can read along with you and leave you some comments throughout the week. But it says right here, your work time today, number 1, as you listen to/read the first part of your fantasy book, jot down notes about the setting. So I know you guys have already listened to the video about the first video for your read aloud, whichever one of those 3 books that you've read. Your job right now is to jot down some things that you notice about the setting. If you need to go back to that video and re-listen to a little bit of it, that would be completely okay as well. So your notes can be a bulleted list, you can write in complete sentences, but I want you to treat this like your reading notebook. So however you would set up your reading notebook is how you're gonna type in your response today. I just wanna see, are you getting an idea of the setting, or are you just writing down, we're in Narnia? Okay, well, yes, that's the name of the place, but tell me more about it. So those of you who are reading along with Mr. Martinez and reading Harry Potter, please do not write Hogwarts as the setting. That's pretty obvious, and as a 5th grader, we want you to be looking at all of the other things going on in the setting. So be really careful and mindful of the setting and what's happening in your story. Number 2, so when you're done with your journal entry, I want you to go to the reflection link. So this is your share or your reflection for today's lesson, and this is how you're gonna get credit for today, as well as doing your number 1, which is where you're writing down about the setting. You also have to do the reflection link, and there's a poll. All that is a question asking which one of the 3 books that you chose. So please make sure you do that also, because that's part of your reading lesson today. Okay, please let me know if you have any questions. Email me if you need to, or call me or text me. I'm here to help you guys. I know it's different listening to these reading lessons online rather than doing them in person and talking through these texts together with your teacher. So if you need help, if you need to talk through your book, please reach out to me, okay? All right, have fun, and I can't wait to see what you write about the setting in your story.